Welcome to Palace Insider, where things get real about the royals. Nice and simple. I've never seen anyone in that circle move as out of line as Meghan Markle, and people are seriously questioning it. Some even wonder if this was an April Fool's stunt, a hack, or some staged royal joke gone wrong. For years, Duchess Sophie played it by the book. No drama, no noise, just loyalty and calm energy. She stood close to Queen Elizabeth II and helped steady King Charles when things got tense. But this time, she dropped that calm image completely, and it didn't look random at all. It felt planned, like pressure finally bursting out. Sophie didn't speak like someone holding a grudge. She spoke like someone protecting the system. Cool voice, sharp delivery, every word hitting hard. She made it clear Meghan's behavior, especially around William, crossed a serious line and didn't fit royal standards at all. Then came the real shock. Sophie hinted the Duchess title was never enough for Meghan. She claimed it looked more like a backup prize, something Meghan accepted but never truly respected, and that raised eyebrows everywhere. Sophie's testimony painted a sharp picture of a woman obsessed with one thing: the title, Princess of Wales, and the man tied to the crown's future, Prince William. She admitted, "I told Edward early on, something is not right here. She is trying too hard not to belong but to position herself," making it clear Meghan wasn't focused on the role she was given. She was looking past it, aiming straight at the throne beside her. Sophie described a flashy Hollywood-style ambition that didn't just clash with royal protocol, it tried to swallow it whole. In her view, Meghan treated the thousand-year-old monarchy not as service, but as a global stage built around herself. Then Sophie broke down Meghan's behavior toward William, going back to 2018, and she didn't hold back. What many saw as warmth, she called a calculated act, claiming aides tracked a pattern of overly familiar gestures meant to pull focus and shake the structure inside the Wales household. She listed 3 issues: into his personal space, private and public, touching his arm or back to suggest closeness, and leaning in, create image of intimacy, something William, known for strict boundaries, did not welcome and reportedly found uncomfortable. It was not a cultural difference alone, Sophie insisted, making it clear this went deeper than surface-level issues. She said it was about ignoring the unspoken codes the family lives by, rules that may not be written but are fully understood. She chose to bypass them to assert a dominance that didn't belong to her, Sophie explained, and that line hit hard. She even called Meghan wild, but not in a carefree way, more like someone refusing to adapt to the structure of royal duty. Sophie described her arrival as a storm, not random, but controlled chaos dropped into a system built on order and tradition. "There is a way we interact," Sophie said, pointing out that Meghan came in expecting the system to bend around her. Instead of learning how things worked, she pushed for change right away, and that didn't sit well with anyone watching closely. Then things got official. A senior palace representative backed Sophie's words, saying they reflect the real expectations and standards of the royal family. That moment changed everything, because the palace didn't step back. It stood right behind her, loud and clear. Suddenly, the silence was over, and what looked like a joke at first turned into something serious, a clear signal that a new phase had begun. Duchess Sophie wasn't just telling stories, she was laying out a full breakdown of a system clash that couldn't be ignored. This wasn't small drama, it was a face-off between 2 totally different mindsets: the Hollywood spotlight and royal duty. For a long time, the world bought into the Fab Four image: clean, polished, perfect. But Sophie pulled that curtain back and made it clear there was never a real team behind those gates. Instead, she described a tight, disciplined structure facing someone determined to disrupt it. This stopped being about style or popularity and turned into something bigger: the survival of a 1,000-year-old institution against personal branding and spotlight chasing. Sophie focused heavily on the contrast between Catherine, Princess of Wales, and Meghan Markle. She described Catherine as the gold standard, fully prepared and committed from day one. She understood that you don't set the pace, you follow the rhythm of the people and the history, Sophie said, showing real respect in her tone. Meghan, on the other hand, came in with a totally different mindset. Sophie claimed she didn't want to follow the rhythm, she wanted to control it. She viewed the monarchy through a Hollywood lens, where success means attention, noise, and being seen above everyone else. In London, success isn't about standing out, it's about keeping things steady and putting the institution first. Sophie made it clear Meghan struggled with that because the system expects you to follow, not lead. In her view, Meghan acted like the star of a show that had been running long before she ever arrived. The most controversial part came when Sophie claimed Meghan saw the Sussex role as beneath her. Being second to the future king and queen, in her eyes, felt like a step down from global fame. Sophie backed up long-running talk that Meghan had her focus set on the Wales household. There was a persistence in how she approached William, Sophie said, stressing it wasn't just friendly behavior, it was strategic. She pointed out that in early appearances, Meghan often stood just a little closer to William than expected, creating a visual link that raised questions. Sophie called this theatrical familiarity, describing gestures like a hand on the back or strong eye contact as moves meant to shift attention and challenge the structure. According to her, it looked like an attempt to stand on equal ground, something William reportedly found uncomfortable. She highlighted January 2019 as a turning point. While the public saw unity, Sophie claimed there was tension behind the scenes, even saying Meghan didn't stick to agreed seating plans, turning a calm event into a quiet power struggle. Sophie claimed Meghan pushed herself into a spot right next to William, breaking the usual couple format of William with Catherine and Harry with Meghan. That move alone sent a message, loud and clear, about how she saw her own status. She also alleged Meghan ignored briefing notes and spoke over Catherine more than once, making sure her voice stood out to the global press. According to Sophie, this wasn't accidental. It was a clear attempt to control the narrative and dominate attention. The fallout didn't stay quiet either. Sophie revealed tensions ran so high after that event that Catherine was left emotional following a tough exchange with Meghan over protocol. It wasn't just a disagreement, Sophie said. It was a declaration of war on the hierarchy, and that line carried serious weight. She claimed Meghan believed her celebrity gave her equal footing with the future king, refusing to accept that roles in the family come from birth and long-term service, not public attention. Sophie doubled down on calling Meghan wild, pointing to moments during official events where she reportedly ignored guidance. Instead of following structure, she greeted people her own way and focused on who she thought mattered most. Sophie said this behavior wasn't about updating the monarchy. It looked more like turning it into a networking space, where image and connections came first over tradition. Sophie pointed to late 2025, when Catherine announced her Together at Christmas concert, a moment meant to unite the country. She claimed Meghan's team in California rushed to shift their Netflix holiday special into the exact same time slot, turning it into direct competition. Sophie said this wasn't new behavior either. She referenced past timing clashes, including the Oprah interview during Prince Philip's illness and other major royal moments being overshadowed. To her, it looked like a repeated pattern of trying to grab attention at critical times. But this time, the outcome spoke for itself. Catherine's concert pulled in 8.4 million viewers, while Meghan's project didn't even crack the UK top rankings, making it a clear win for the royal side. Then, Sophie shifted into even more serious territory. She began addressing long-whispered concerns about Meghan's behavior around Prince William, and the tone became far more intense. By this point, any idea that this was a joke was gone. Sophie delivered a detailed breakdown, describing actions the palace had quietly viewed as uncomfortable for years. According to her, this went beyond personality clashes and into crossing physical boundaries tied to royal protocol. It wasn't a one-off, it wasn't a mistake, it was a pattern, Sophie said, locking her eyes on the interviewer with serious intensity. She made it clear this wasn't casual behavior, but something tracked over time. In royal protocol, physical contact is limited, even within family settings, and always handled with care. Meghan, she ignored the soul and the skin of the institution, Sophie stated, pointing to early concerns going back to the 2017 Sandringham Christmas. While the public saw warmth and charm, staff reportedly noticed behavior that didn't align with expectations around the future king. Sophie's most striking claims focused on repeated efforts to create physical closeness with Prince William. She described it as stepping outside every accepted standard, raising concerns behind palace doors. She highlighted 3 moments, starting with a May 2018 garden party just days after the wedding. Meghan allegedly greeted William with a cheek kiss and held his arm longer than expected. According to sources Sophie referenced, William appeared uncomfortable, and that reaction quickly caught the attention of senior staff. At an October 2018 mental health event inside Buckingham Palace, cameras caught Meghan placing her hand on William's back while speaking, a gesture usually seen between close partners. Sophie pointed this out as a clear overstep, noting William quickly shifted away, a quiet but firm reaction that didn't go unnoticed. Then came the 2019 polo match, where Sophie claimed the pattern continued. She described Meghan leaning into William's space and at times directing attention toward him instead of Harry, creating moments that felt staged for effect. It wasn't just about a hug, Sophie explained, stressing it was about what that moment suggested to everyone watching. She believed it projected a level of closeness that wasn't real and, more importantly, wasn't welcomed by William. Sophie said this behavior crossed a line, calling it disrespectful to Catherine and a direct challenge to royal boundaries tied to the future king. Her tone shifted even further as she questioned the intent behind it all. Sophie suggested this wasn't random, but deliberate, claiming Meghan's actions were aimed at disrupting the structure around the Wales household. There were moments where it felt like she wasn't looking for Harry's approval, but William's attention, Sophie said, raising serious questions about motive. Sophie described it as a Hollywood storyline playing out inside a 1,000-year-old palace, and she said it left everyone, especially William, deeply uncomfortable. For the first time, she confirmed there was an internal HR review launched in March 2021, and it went far beyond what the public had heard. While most people only knew about bullying claims, Sophie revealed the report allegedly included detailed records of etiquette issues and repeated boundary concerns. This wasn't vague talk, it was documented behavior that raised serious questions inside the palace. According to Sophie, this included sending late-night messages to senior royals and staff, skipping official channels to gain influence, and ignoring personal space with figures like the Queen and then Prince Charles in favor of more informal interactions. She also claimed private family tensions were shared in ways that shaped media narratives, creating a contrast between a warm American image and a cold British system. Sophie summed it up by saying Meghan's approach didn't match the duty-driven structure of the royal family. She argued Meghan understood the rules but acted like they didn't apply to her and warned that repeated boundary pushing could have far bigger consequences than people realize. In the fourth segment of the April 1st broadcast, Duchess Sophie shifted focus from public behavior to what she described as the internal breakdown of the Sussex dynamic. She claimed that once Meghan realized Prince William wouldn't respond to her style or approach, everything changed. According to Sophie, the strategy moved away from trying to fit in and turned into something far more serious. It wasn't about gaining acceptance anymore. It was about cutting ties and reshaping the situation around Prince Harry. There was a moment in late 2019, Sophie said, her tone turning heavy, signaling a shift from tension to something deeper and more concerning. She explained that Meghan had tried her approach, but when it didn't work with William's firm sense of duty, the response wasn't to step back. Instead, Sophie claimed it became a calculated move. She described it as a gradual process, not sudden, aimed at pulling Harry away from the close relationships he had always relied on. She knew what Harry had endured, Sophie added, pointing to his past struggles and pressures. According to her, those personal factors became part of a much bigger and more complicated situation. She gave him joy, yes, but she also closed the door behind them and locked it, Sophie said, describing a shift that raised serious concern. She claimed that between 2019 and early 2020, Meghan became the main influence over Harry's day-to-day world. According to Sophie, communication between Harry and William started to fade. Requests for simple conversations were often blocked with responses like, "Meghan says we're busy," or "Meghan feels we need space," creating what Sophie called a clear divide. She described it as a psychological barrier, where Meghan positioned herself as the only one Harry could rely on. At the same time, Sophie claimed the rest of the family was painted in a negative light despite years of close relationships. Sophie argued this dynamic made Harry feel isolated, as if the world was against them, leaving him with fewer connections outside that circle. To highlight this, she pointed to Archie's christening in July 2019. Meghan reportedly declined traditional media access and kept key details private, including the identities of the godparents. Sophie said this wasn't just about privacy, but about showing control. In her view, it signaled a shift where long-standing royal expectations no longer applied in the same way. She added that during this period, the behavior she described as wild became more noticeable and harder for the institution to manage. Behind closed doors, Meghan reportedly told staff that being a duchess meant equality, not hierarchy. Sophie claimed she pushed for the same security, budget, and global platform as Catherine, the future queen, and when those requests were denied based on long-standing rules, everything shifted. According to Sophie, that's when the narrative started to change, and tensions grew stronger behind the scenes. The April 1st interview hit its peak when Sophie addressed the March 2021 Oprah Winfrey interview. She didn't hold back, calling it a clear break from royal discretion and describing it as a calculated move rather than a personal moment. "I offered to speak to her more than once," Sophie said, confirming she tried to reach out in 2020. "I reached out as a woman who had also joined this family from the outside. I wanted to offer a hand," she explained, but said those efforts were turned down. "She declined every time. I have Harry. That's all I need," Sophie recalled, and that statement carried serious weight in her view. Sophie believed that response showed Meghan wasn't looking for guidance, but full control over Harry's loyalty. She went further, claiming the Oprah interview wasn't about seeking help, but about building a public narrative. And by that point, the situation had escalated into something much harder to repair. She took a family disagreement and rebranded it as a human rights issue, Sophie said, shaking her head at how far things had gone. She claimed Meghan began to see the crown as something standing in her way, and when she couldn't reshape it, the approach shifted toward challenging it directly. As the April 1st broadcast moved deeper, Sophie turned from personal tensions to bigger constitutional questions. This wasn't about emotions anymore. It became a serious discussion about the balance between royal structure and global celebrity influence. For the first time, she addressed topics that had fueled years of speculation, including royal titles, security demands, and internal divisions within the family. Her words made it clear this went far beyond headlines and into the core of how the institution functions. Sophie also spoke about Archie and Lilibet's titles, an issue that gained attention after 2022. While the titles Prince and Princess were later used, she suggested recognition inside the palace was not as simple as it appeared. "It's not about the children," Sophie stated firmly. "It's about what those titles represent, making it clear they carry meaning tied to lineage, trust, and responsibility." She argued that titles are not tools for image or branding, and warned that ongoing conflict with the institution makes those decisions far more complicated than the public might think. Sophie confirmed that King Charles's hesitation wasn't about heritage, it was about behavior and trust. She explained that the crown operates on loyalty, and once that is questioned, even long-standing traditions can come under review. In a moment that caught major attention, Sophie addressed ongoing speculation around documentation tied to the Sussex children. She chose her words very carefully, avoiding direct accusations, but making her point clear. "The Crown never demanded a DNA test," Sophie stated, speaking with precision. But when questions arise about why titles weren't immediately confirmed, the answer comes down to discretion, she added, pointing to the importance of clarity and trust within the institution. She emphasized that it's not only about biology, but also intention and transparency when it comes to royal titles. According to Sophie, expectations around royal births exist for a reason, and any push for complete privacy can create tension with those standards. Sophie then shifted to Prince Harry's legal battles over security. She argued that requesting state-level protection while stepping back from royal duties raises serious concerns. To demand that level of protection without the role that supports it is not just unrealistic, it creates risk, Sophie said. She warned it could set a wider precedent, where status alone is seen as enough to access state resources. "Harry wants the shield of the monarchy without the sword of its responsibilities," Sophie said, delivering one of her sharpest lines. She made it clear that duty doesn't work halfway, and drew a direct comparison to Prince Andrew, pointing out the king's position was firm on this. According to Sophie, if someone is not a working royal, they do not receive state protection, no exceptions. She also addressed rumors about a possible connection between Meghan and Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie. Sophie suggested Meghan's familiar approach extended to them as part of a bigger plan. "She tried to recruit them," Sophie claimed, explaining it as an attempt to create a divide between younger royals and the established structure around William and Catherine. But according to her, that effort didn't succeed. She said Beatrice and Eugenie recognized the situation clearly and chose not to be part of anything that could be seen as working against the core of the family. As the broadcast reached its final moments, Sophie's tone shifted again, becoming more reflective but still firm. The idea that this was ever a joke had completely faded. What remained, according to Sophie, was a clear message that the monarchy had faced serious pressure, adapted, and come out more defined in the process. As the broadcast faded out, the message hit hard and clear. Sophie made it known the institution stood firm, stronger, and more focused than ever. "We are not performers, we are stewards," Sophie said, her voice steady and serious. "The crown is not something you wear for applause, it's something you carry in silence for generations you'll never meet," she added, laying out the core belief behind everything. She argued this was the key difference that caused years of tension. In her view, Meghan saw the royal role as a global spotlight, while the monarchy demands the opposite, putting the institution above the individual at all times. Sophie also pointed to Catherine as the clear contrast. While one side brought disruption, she described Catherine as calm, focused, and committed to long-term duty. According to Sophie, this wasn't about image or attention. It was about preserving something much bigger that isn't meant to revolve around one person. Catherine never had to outshine anyone, Sophie said, making a sharp point. She explained that real influence comes from the crown itself, not the individual, and credited Catherine's steady work and presence as the reason people trust her. "These aren't performances, they are acts of constancy," Sophie added, highlighting why Catherine's support remains strong year after year. She then pointed to the numbers, saying they tell the full story. By late 2025, Catherine held 73% favorability, William 69%, while Meghan stood far lower, showing a clear public divide. "The public isn't easily fooled," Sophie said, claiming people recognize the difference between long-term duty and attention-driven moments. She also explained the palace's silence wasn't weakness. Instead of reacting, they chose to step back and focus on their work, cutting off the attention that fuels ongoing conflict and letting the institution speak for itself. Sophie didn't hold back when describing Harry and Meghan's current position. She said they still have titles, but no real role, no official backing, and no influence within the system. By late 2025, she claimed the situation had shifted hard. Major deals were reportedly scaled back, and their foundation saw a noticeable drop, painting a picture of a brand losing momentum. "You cannot leave a family, call it toxic, and then try to sell a royal lifestyle," Sophie said, calling out what she viewed as a clear contradiction. She added that Harry appeared more isolated, while Meghan faced the reality that the monarchy only works if you fully commit to its structure. Looking ahead to 2026, Sophie spoke about a monarchy that's more focused and steady. With King Charles, Queen Camilla, and Prince William and Catherine leading the way, she said the institution had entered a new phase. "We've had our era of correction," Sophie stated firmly. "We know who we are," reinforcing the idea of duty over popularity. Her final message echoed a simple theme: the crown endures no matter the pressure. If you made it this far, drop a like, leave a comment with your thoughts, share this with others, and subscribe for more updates like this.